Chapter 1 of the Philosophy of Freedom is called Conscious Human Action. It begins with the question of freedom. Is a human being free in thought and action, or compelled by the unyielding necessity of natural law? If we are merely automatons that are not capable of independent thought, we would go through our everyday life in a cult-like state of sleep. Our actions would be compelled by the necessity to obey programming downloaded into our heads by society, such as upbringing, advertising, social media, and political leaders. Deep inside, someone in this cult state of consciousness will feel something is lacking in their life. One feels something is lacking if a person has not at some point faced in deep seriousness the question of freedom or necessity. Most people assume they are free to think and act as they choose. Is this an illusion caused by being unaware of the strings of determinism? The philosophy of freedom begins by posing the question of freedom to those who are willing to seriously examine themselves. Are we truly free, or are we determined by something else? In this video, we will look at what Rudolf Steiner and Jordan Peterson have discovered about the relationship between freedom and determinism. We will see that the key factor in both of their views is an awakened consciousness.
Dancing fearless.
It is obvious that a person is not free if they don't know why they act. Ethical individualists know why they act. Every human deed is ruled by a motive or reason to act. This motive is the law that determines the action. There are two kinds of laws of behavior: the laws that are our own, that we accept or create, and the laws that are imposed from outside. To know oneself as a person who acts means to possess, as knowledge, the laws of conduct, the moral concepts and ideals that correspond to the deeds. If we recognize these laws as our own, then our deeds are our own creations. We are free when we obey our own laws of behavior. We are not free when we are compelled to obey an imposed law from the outside. To carry out a deed in obedience to a law external to the person who acts is to be unfree. To carry out a deed in obedience to the person's own law is to be free. Jordan Peterson says that another factor of free will is a time gradient. The further you look out into the future, the more free your choices are. The closer you are to taking action, the more you rely on automated conditioned responses. When the laws of behavior that we establish are repeated enough over time, they become automatic conditioned behavior. What is the relationship of freedom to deterministic conditioned behavior? Jordan Peterson uses driving a car as an example.
As you look out into the future, perhaps the farther out you look into the future, the farther down the road, let's say, the more free your choices are. But the closer they get to implementation, the more they become deterministic, governed by standard causal processes. You don't look right in front of you when you're driving a car, because whatever is right in front of you, if you're going 40 miles an hour or whatever, you've already run over. You look a quarter of a mile down the road, and that gives you the opportunity to see what's coming and to set up a sequence of increasingly automated movements that culminate in whatever it is that you're doing while you're driving. And so there's a gradation from choice to determinism, a temporal gradation.
When we look ahead and see we are approaching a crash scene, we prepare to carry out some automated car driving movements, such as changing our speed or pulling over. Another example of how we have more freedom when we look ahead is playing a piano. Piano players must practice for hours to establish the automatic conditioned movements of the fingers to play the piano. They watch the notes ahead of playing before they release the deterministic movements of the fingers to play.
Here's another way of thinking about it. Like, we know, for example, that people who are expert at playing the piano look ahead of where they're playing. and they're doing the same thing. They're watching the notes, they're seeing where they're going, and then they're disinhibiting the automated structures that enable them to play what they've practiced so thoroughly. They're disinhibiting those structures, and then they go automatically. And then what happens if you make a mistake is that consciousness notes the error and then unpacks the motor sequences that have been practiced, and then you re-practice them and sequence them again until they become automatic and deterministic. So there's choice in that you're reading ahead, but there's no choice in that once you've read ahead and disinhibited the actions, then they run ballistically.
Piano players, 1, have free choice in what they play by reading ahead. 2, they have no free choice after releasing the trained automatic movement of the fingers. And 3, piano players assess the automatic action as correct or not. The key factor is consciousness. It requires an awakened consciousness for freedom and deterministic conditioning to work together. Our freedom is increased by 1, consciously looking ahead, 2, consciously setting rules of behavior, and 3, consciously assessing our action as to whether it is correct or not. In Steiner's discussion of freedom in Chapter 1, he repeatedly mentions the important role of consciousness. After all, the title is Conscious Human Action. The chapter presents various views supporting and opposing freedom. In each case, Steiner states the key point is the difference between a conscious motive and an unconscious motive. There is freedom with a conscious motive because we know why we act. By looking ahead, setting clear goals, and monitoring our behavior, we grow as self-determined, free individuals.